Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Meraki Unboxed podcast. My name is Sammy Brenner. I'm going to be taking us through the episode today, and I could not be more excited about the amazing female leader that we have on the call, who I will be introducing very shortly here. But for those of you who have heard me before, you know the spiel. The Meraki Unboxed podcast has new content coming out about every 2 weeks. So if you're listening and you have a great idea or you want to collaborate with us, you want to be on the podcast, please reach out, let me know. We would absolutely love to work with you if it makes sense. So without further ado, let me get into the background and introduction. So Erin Myers came to Cisco Meraki back in 2015, but prior to her time to coming to Meraki and working with us, she worked at a VC firm, so a venture capital firm in Menlo Park as a marketing assistant. And then she had a career at a startup where she helped build an operations engine for a company called MessageMe, which eventually was acquired by Yahoo. But we got her at Meraki. She landed at Meraki, and in her time here, she's definitely worn various different hats. So she joined the organization as a sales operations analyst, then became a sales ops manager, and her most recent role is the director of all of sales operations globally. So excited to get in and learn more about what that entails. She's helped scale the business from around 500 million to $1 billion, $5 billion, excuse me, in sales revenue. Wowza. Erin lives in the Bay Area with her wife and her 3 adorable kiddos. Yes, she is a mom of 3 under the age of 5, Fiona, Dylan, and William. They're all adorable. And as a former D1 soccer player, she loves to stay active. So that list includes snowboarding and mountain biking and yoga, just to name a few. Welcome to the Meraki Unboxed podcast, Erin. How are you?
Thank you, Sammy. I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're so happy to have you. That is a pretty incredible bio, if I don't say so myself. You have a track record of proven success, and you're superwoman because you have 3 kids, do this job, and like love to stay active and have a life outside of work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we're going to have to get into how you make this all look so easy. But I love to start with this question. Erin, tell us, what is your story, right? How did you kind of get to Cisco Meraki and hear about the company before joining?
Yeah, good question. So I was happily working at a startup as a sales ops analyst and had the pleasure of overlapping with a current employee that is still with Meraki. And this employee and I, we overlapped for maybe a week, maybe 2, but I think a week. And she reached out to me shortly after she had joined Meraki and was like, look, I love this company. We have an open role. I think you'd be a good fit for it. If you're interested, why don't you go ahead and apply? So I'll never forget, I went to the Meraki website, and the first thing I noticed was the office space. I was like, whoa, this is like a real place where people go work. That looks pretty cool. So I applied, and before I knew it, I was in the office for an interview, met the team, interviewed with a few sales folks, and also at the time, Chris Story was the leader of our department, met with him. Everyone on the team was super intelligent, and just really was able to articulate, one, their experience as an employee here, but also the mission of this company. And here I am. I accepted the offer, and the rest is history. 8 years later.
Wow. The rest is history. That's right. Yeah, that's incredible. I echo that sentiment, though, coming in and talking with people during my interview process that could articulate the values. And it just felt like such a inclusive environment. The office was beautiful and amazing. It's just, people talk about that Meraki magic, and I definitely felt that right away. So it sounds like that kind of drew you in as well.
Absolutely. It was one of those things where I was like, all right, like you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? And honestly, I'm still in awe of the Meraki magic and just, the inclusivity that really is alive here, as well as the really smart and talented people that are all here trying to drive, the company in the same type of direction, which is really special.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, after being in sales for a decade, yes, that's kind of crazy to admit. I certainly, understand the importance of a sales operations and what that means to being a salesperson. You guys are the backbone, right, of how our business runs, and we could not function without your team. But maybe those listening who aren't as familiar with sales operations or don't know a ton about it, like what is under the sales ops umbrella and like what responsibilities does your team have?
Today, under the sales ops umbrellas, there's three different teams that roll up to me. First being, core sales ops group, which is the team of sales operations coordinators, analysts, sales efficiency and effective analysts. We have some technical experts on our team, as well as a data scientist. And then we also have the sales admin team that is really the backbone of the field sales organization, as well as the sales support team that helps to ensure that automation through some of the Cisco facing tools land in the right approval buckets. They help with other day-to-day run the business tasks that are super important. But really under the remit of sales operations is a cross-collaborative team that really touches and influences every single department both outside and inside of the sales organization. And so from a sales facing perspective, you can think of the sales operations team as a team that really tries to drive global rules and processes that are standardized across the board. Since we're a global organization, it's important to solve for challenges that the sales team may experience from a global perspective as much as possible, while there are certain circumstances where we have to have theater specific rules and guidelines. They also really work on cross-functional projects, so any type of like Cisco facing initiative, such as like the RSW transition. We work to really bring the sales team to the table and think about system changes, like what's going to be the least impactful. How do we make sure that the sales team isn't impacted by systematic changes and are really able to continue focus on their day-to-day, which is selling to our customers. So that's one piece of it. And then the rest is really thinking about efficiency, scale, automation. What are processes that we're running today that from a long-term perspective need to be overhauled and fixed, both from just the day-to-day overhead from a sales ops team, but also to be able to support the needs of the business from an architectures and systems perspective moving forward.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot that your team does. So how much of it is like proactive work versus like reactive work? It sounds like your team really straddles the line of like forward thinking, scaling, automation, and then reactive things that are like happening in the systems and in the business and what needs to change. Like, is that a conversation that you have with your team?
That's a great question. Yeah, that is a conversation that we have pretty regularly with the team. I think for context, when stepped in as the leader of this organization, we were very much of a reactive team, right? Like kind of hid behind our computers, did process-driven things, like didn't really have a solid frontward facing relationship with sales. And to me, to be successful in an operations role, but specifically in sales operations, like your rules, your processes, like any type of changes, it's only as good as the buy-in that you have from your sales leaders and your sales team. And so the first couple of years, we worked really hard to become front and center, right? Make the sales leaders, the sales team our best friend, so that we could really dive into the details to understand what their day-to-day experience was like, as well as get an idea of where it is we're going. We had a high level understanding, of course, from the LRSP, certain OKRs, things like that, but we were still very much reactive in nature. And so upon partnering with sales more closely, having those relationships across the board within the organization, it really helped us get more proactive than reactive, and, kind of get ahead of the game so that we have the infrastructure, we have the policies in place so that, when that conversation does arrive, it's like, hey, we actually already have a solution for this, and here's what it is, here's why we landed here. On top of that, any type of major changes that we do, we usually identify a sales stakeholder to be the executive sponsor to help kind of, articulate the mission, the why down to the sales team. That helps with the buy-in and the change, and it's easier to get those processes adopted the more front-facing you are there. There are certainly things where we do have to be reactive in nature, right? We're a lean team, support a very large sales organization, and so with a company of this scale, there's natural things that slip through that may be a priority with one team that we weren't necessarily looped in on early on, and so there's a need to kind of level set, give them an understanding of where we are today, what we can or cannot do to support this initiative, and then define a roadmap to where we can get to, ideally, some sort of automation or scalable process moving forward.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for kind of digging into that. And it's cool to hear the evolution of your team where you came in and it very much felt reactive, and now how it's turned. And you have to do some of that by nature, but you're definitely have a more strategic lens on the business. And that's awesome to hear. So talk to me a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like. I mean, you manage so many different teams. That team is global. Myself being in a global role, it's really hard to feel like you're an effective leader in 3 different geos, 3 different time zones, right? That are vastly different. Talk to us about like how you manage your time, you manage your day, and what's it like to oversee this global team?
Yeah, so first of all, the leaders that I have that roll up to me, I feel so lucky, from Sean Kumar, who leads the sales support team, Jessica Phillips, Rebecca Palmer. We have some team leads under them, and then Catherine Hang, Danae Johnson, and Jake Taylor that lead different teams under the sales ops team specifically. They're a team of rock stars, and I think that first and foremost, we have weekly check-ins with each of the leadership teams, and I really view my role here as one, setting the foundation for what the goal is for this fiscal year as a company, and then really breaking that down to each of the individual teams, what that means for them, and kind of letting them run their team like they're their own CEO. And I'm here to, one, make sure that their work is brought forward to leadership so it's celebrated. 2, remove any roadblocks that they may encounter upon the way, as well as help solve any of the issues. But really believe in that self-empowerment with the leadership team, and I'm just here as an advisor, really, to help them, but certainly don't want to get in their way. If I were to look at that room and that list of people, they always say to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Well, that's certainly my team, and it works, and it works really well. From a day-to-day perspective, sales operations is really a cool role because, like I said before, you're involved with every single department under the Meraki umbrella, and so you get to work with engineers, developers, project managers, project management, like literally everyone. And so a lot of my time is spent on these larger company initiatives, and again, wearing that sales hat, helping articulate the vision and the strategy of the sales team, and figuring out how that fits into the broader picture as an organization as we continue to evolve. It's super fun, right? Like, you don't always have the answers. It's a lot of strategy. It's a lot of, hey, let's go get this person's perspective. I certainly have my opinions, but let's collect opinions across the board and come up with the best proposal to be able to drive something forward. So that's certainly something that I love about my job, is just those various relationships that you get to build in this role across the company.
That's so awesome. So you said a couple things that I want to touch on, which I think speak to your leadership style. Making sure that your leaders, like their work is celebrated. That's so important, right? Is folks having a leader who they feel like sees them, understands them, recognizes incredible work. And that just means that they want to work harder, right, for their leaders. So love that you said that, and this idea of surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you. Amen. That is my hiring strategy too. But yeah, very cool too that, to your point, sales operations, you really do touch every segment of the business, and you're learning things every day, and you're meeting new people, and you really cannot operate in a silo. That's like not an option for your team. So
Absolutely.
right, communication is everything. So, speaking of your leadership style, you didn't have, right, the most traditional path into leadership. You started out, in operations and kind of moved your way up and eventually got into a leadership position. But have you always felt called to lead a team? Is it something you fell into? Like, talk to us about what your path was here at Meraki.
That I don't really know how to answer that question, but I'm going to give you my best answer. I think that growing up in sports, right? Like going all the way through college as a D1 athlete, that team type environment was super natural to me, and that's where I thrive. I think that one of the things that I always take with me in terms of like just meeting people where they're at is like people just want to, one, understand if they're seen, if they're heard, and if what they're saying matters. And I think that, like, again, being in that team environment and then coming into Meraki, which was very much like almost like a flat organization at the time. Like every single person, no matter their title, was reachable and would make time for you. And that was something that I thought was really special. It also scared the hell out of me, but I also was given the opportunity to ask my questions, and like I too felt that what I had to say mattered. And so with that feeling, it kind of came naturally, right? Like I had a leader at the time that I'll never forget pulled me aside and was like, "Look, I want you in this role." My immediate response was, I'm not a fit for this role. I'm not fit for leadership. Like, absolutely not. Yes, you are. Here's why. Here's what I want you to do. Trust me on this one. You need to take a leap of faith and trust your skill set. And me, like, I define myself as an introvert. Like, ooh, like, I don't know. I don't know about this, but I dove in with 2 feet and found out over time, like I feel like I need to give myself more credit for this, but I didn't realize that I had an ability to connect with people on just like a human to human level. Like let's build like a professional relationship, and let's see how to make this work. And I think that in doing so and seeing the buy-in from the team, getting my network expanded almost immediately within the company, made me feel more comfortable in what I was doing. And it also made me reflect on, gosh, there's probably a lot of other people that have very similar feelings to me that also need to be pushed into, stretch assignments, bigger roles than what they're doing right now. And, it was also a learning lesson as well. Like, there's other people that are fine where they are. And that is 100% acceptable. Some people are like, yep, I know I could probably do this, but actually I'm good right here. So learning that balance and really just drawing on those connections and those relationships that I was able to build helped me grow into where I am today. Certainly still have leaders that, I'm lucky to have a lot of mentors within the organization and outside of it that continue to push me beyond my comfort level to, lead the organization.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a relatable story. And the fact that you had a leader who saw something in you, who was like, follow me, take a chance, let's try this. And you were vulnerable enough to say, okay, like I'm going to trust you and you see something in me and I don't see it in myself right now. It's so important. And now you can show up and be that leader for other people, which I know you already have been. So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I feel lucky. I hope that I am that leader for someone else that is also, doesn't have the confidence maybe right now to push beyond their comfort zone. But I certainly hope to give that gift and pass that on.
Yep, absolutely. And you already have it, right? You said your ability to connect with people on a human to human level, like that is a superpower, right? That's so important. And we know half of the job is just making sure our people feel seen and heard, and that
Absolutely.
they're recognized for the work they do. So thank you for being that leader here at our company. Now, I know you're going to blush when we talk about this. But you have an incredible brand at this company. And I remember when I joined, your name kept coming up and people were like, you need to meet Erin. You need to, she's a big deal. She's well connected. She knows people. She's a wealth of knowledge. She's extremely well respected. She's a strong female leader within this organization. But you don't always put yourself in the spotlight to, you're not like a me kind of person, right? So you kind of have this delicate balance. And you and I have talked about this before, imposter syndrome and maybe,
There you say the words, Sammy.
I
There you
know,
say the words.
I know, and not even wanting to do this podcast maybe initially, but you've taken the company, right? You've helped us grow from 500 million to 5 billion, and that is a big deal. So talk to us a little bit about, for people listening out there, your experience with it, because imposter syndrome manifests differently for different people. So what has your experience been around it? And do you have a situation that you could share with us that you like overcame it, or how do you actively deal with it?
I struggle with imposter syndrome to the point where I still get extremely nervous just to host my own team meetings within my department. Um, and I share it, right? Like, I think it's important. There's people that struggle with it. There's some that don't, but like, I'm human and I have these feelings and I'm still going to stand up and I'm going to put my best foot forward and, host hopefully a super interesting meeting with a lot of takeaways, good dialogue, etc. I will never forget this one time Todd Nightingale was our leader at the time. We were on the fourth floor in the cafeteria at an all hands meeting. And actually, I think it was an Ask Me Anything session. And he was rolling out a new initiative, company-wide initiative at Meraki. And at the time, it was like, Meraki was the first time, at least, that the conversation about like everyone feeling like we were siloed in the work that we were doing, right? And it's like, gosh, we're feeling these growing pains. Like it's becoming harder and harder to get work done across departments. It seems like, we're not aligned on our priorities, like our strategies. And so Todd stood up and was like, we hear you. This is what we're going to do about it. And as he was talking, I remember thinking, and like my legs started shaking. I was like, gosh, I actually don't see how this is going to help. It actually, in my opinion, I think that this is going to make us even more siloed. So I was sitting there, and again, the leader that had pushed me into leadership was sitting right next to me, and he looks at me and is like, you have a question, don't you? I shook my head yes. And I wanted to say no, but he knew that I had a question. And so he actually raised his hand, got the microphone, and handed it to me. And I had no choice but to stand up and ask my question. And my legs were shaking. My voice probably cracked a couple times, but nonetheless, I stood up and I asked my question. And Todd stood there perplexed. And he was like, you know what? That's a really good question. And I don't have an answer for you right now, but I'm going to come find you after this meeting.
Wow.
And so I sat down, like, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe I just did that, but I'm so glad I asked it. It was relevant because, in my head I was like, yeah, this question doesn't make sense. Like, everyone's going to know the answer to this, et cetera, et cetera. Well, come to find out, I had a great conversation. Todd did come find me almost immediately after that meeting. We had a really good conversation. I think that was like one of the first times where I imposter syndrome to the max, was kind of forced to stand up and ask my question. But in reality, I was so glad I did because, one, I'm able to share that story with other folks that struggle with imposter syndrome as well. But it was a lesson in, hey, like, there are no dumb questions. Like, stand up and ask your question. If you have a question, ask it. If you have something to say, whether it's in that setting or in a different setting, certainly go to your leader, and it's worth a conversation. And so, I again, like, try to find my zen before my, like, any meeting, whether it be a team meeting or, another cross-functional meeting that I have to lead, or, with senior staff, and just speak from where I'm at, right? Like, I have a different view than everyone else of the business, and what I've learned over time is it's valuable. And I certainly feel a certain way about something, or certainly have questions to pose to the group. It's not going to go anywhere if you don't say anything, or if you don't, use your voice and speak. And I think the other biggest thing for me on this subject, imposter syndrome, is a lot of folks feel this way. And it's interesting to build like that network of comfort and, resources and support to continue to move forward and evolve yourself and grow. And at times it becomes easier for me, but, even right now, I certainly feel nervous and, gosh, do I have anything valuable that people want to listen to? But, you don't know unless you put it out there.
Exactly. And I can answer both of those questions, and it's yes and yes, always. You have so much value to add, and your perspective is so unique. And because you touch so many different teams, I mean, you're really like the melting pot. You see so much, you touch so much, you have such an expansive view of the business that, like, your input is imperative to what we do and decisions that are being made. But thank you for sharing that. I mean, that kind of spins off to, like, you called yourself, an introvert, right? So I'm going to call you kind of a self-proclaimed introvert. This idea of exposure and building your brand and making sure people know who you are within an organization and know the work you do. I can tell you, leading the global ADR organization, a lot of my ADRs are trying to learn how to build out that skill set, right? How do I put myself out there? How do I meet people? How do I add value? Is it really that important to my future? Building my brand, networking. So, Erin, what do you think about this whole idea of building your brand and getting out there? And I guess, how have you done it? And what tips do you have for people who are maybe apprehensive or don't know where to begin, or maybe don't think it's that valuable? Like, what's your input there?
I think for me, it's happened organically, but if I were to take a bird's eye view and kind of look at my track record here, I think that, again, it's important to meet people where they are. Like, I think one kind of cheesy example is, like, you join a meeting, you've never met these folks before, and you see someone that's wearing a UNC Tar Heels shirt, right? It's like, oh, like, UNC fan, who's your favorite player, right? Like, building that connection with someone is super important. Like, let's pause. We're all here to get work done, et cetera, but we spend a lot of time together, and there's that, like, baseline level of building a professional relationship, and it's observing, learning, asking questions, like, really understanding, like, how do you best communicate? Like, what's your preference? Is it an in-person meeting? Is it a walk? Like, how are we going to maximize our time together? I think is the first thing. Like, slowing down, like, let's move slow to be fast. Like, and then it kind of helps you understand how to best work with someone, how to best talk to them. How, is it email communication? Like, what works best for you? I think that's something that, one, again, I didn't know that I had this like skill set, but I think that that's what has really helped me build my reputation and my brand. Like, I want to know who Sammy Brenner is, like, and then how do you lead your team? Let me understand more about you, your leadership, your team, like, and then let's figure out how we're going to best work together and we have a great experience together. And again, that baseline foundation of that relationship, projects get slowed, timelines get pushed, like it just helps. It helps with that conversation. There's an established level of trust there, so that that we're in this together and we're both working together to drive this project to completion, or make this big change within a team or an organization. I think that really helps. And there's certainly a time and a place for that, but like I think carving out that space is really important.
Yeah,
And
I was
oh,
just gonna say I couldn't agree more. Like developing that genuine interest in the other person goes so far.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if you look at my team, right, like my team probably has the lowest attrition rates in all of Meraki, and like that baseline level of trust, like healthy banter, let's debate something, let's agree to disagree, like that's how the team shows up. And I think that that's how you drive a successful team, is diversity in thought, the openness to challenge one another, to you know force people to think outside of the box, because sometimes you can be so focused on singular goal of accomplishment that you miss a couple pieces that could really help something get off the ground or help something scale. And so having that collaborative environment with respect and trust is really important, and helps you efficiently get things done.
Yeah, no small feat, my friend. Lowest attrition rate in Meraki. Little flex. I love it. And it's so
Small
true. Your
flex.
team, yeah, your team sticks around for a reason, and you do create that environment where people can rumble, right, and challenge and say controversial ideas or opinions or asking for feedback or input, and it's like a safe space, and you're allowed to agree to disagree.
Exactly, but also challenge me, right?
Mhm.
Like, I that challenge and like, helping me think outside the box, etc. Like it goes across the board. Again, like I view my role as someone that celebrates their work, removes barriers, but I believe in the value of like having a flat org. Really helps us be even more successful in what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, in terms of people challenging you, I want you to share some of your experience around like conflict management. So, being in sales operations, you're working with sales leaders all the time, or just different leaders across all different BUs of the business. And there's going to be people with strong opinions, and there are going to be account battles, and there are going to be leaders or individuals who are not happy, right, with decisions that have been made. And I have been in meetings with you where you have this like uncanny ability to just stay like cool, calm, collected and operate from like a facts first model and make decisions that are going to be right for the business as a whole. Talk to us a little bit about how you stay grounded and calm in those like very high stress situations. You make it look so easy, but I know it's not. Like what's the secret?
Well, I think one, having to play zone defense with 3 young children at home helps. No, again, it's that notion of let's move slow to be fast. Let's give everyone in this conversation an uninterrupted opportunity to speak their perspective. Without interrupting, give them that platform to speak, right? And listening with intent, right? Because there's a fine balance for making a decision that's in the best interest of the business, right? And that's always first and foremost. But then there's a people aspect, right? Like, it's the right thing to do for this sales team. Like, can we find a middle ground? Because as detailed as we want to make, let's say, the rules of engagement, there's gray areas, there's corner cases, etc. And so I think that being able to listen from a non-biased perspective, and also realizing that I don't have to make it a decision right then and there, right? Like, something where I can give everyone the space again to feel heard. I can give my immediate feedback, but also let folks know that I'm either going to take this back and sit with it for a little bit, and I will follow up, and whether that's over email or call another meeting to go through my decision, that's one thing. But, I think that, again, it goes back to those basic principles of people want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, and they want to know that what they said mattered. And painting that picture for everyone and creating space to minimize the emotion around it, like, let's just speak from the facts and then go from there, is super important when you're dealing with conflict. And so that's often what I lead with in those scenarios. And even, whether it's sales to sales related or, cross-functional initiatives where it's like, oof, like, we don't have this in place. Like, are we sure that this is the best decision for the company right now? Like, are we considering operational overhead to support this? What about the sales rep experience if they don't have visibility to this? Like, what are we gaining by pressing forward here? Or is it in our best interest to go back, reset expectations around prioritization, and make sure that we have the full end-to-end solution in place before rolling this out? So, there's power in the pause, right? And that's something that I certainly have learned over time. When I first stepped into this role, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I need to respond to this email and I need to have an answer right away. Or, oh my gosh, I'm going to go into this meeting and they're expecting me to have an answer right then and there. It's not the case. It's not always the case. And, it's not always in your best interest to shoot off the cuff to try and have an answer just to make that conflict go away, because if you're not diligent in your thought and thinking about the company, and all the different scenarios that usually go into making a decision of such nature, then there's things that are going to get missed, and you're not really going to be able to speak to the why behind it for, whoever was, for lack of better words, losing in that scenario. And so, being able to clearly articulate your decision and the why behind it also helps, right? It helps with the trust. It helps with those relationships moving forward in the event that there's another conflict that arises, which normally will happen. But it helps people find comfort, and that you're looking at all sides of the coin, not just one, not just the loudest person in the room, if you will.
Right. Wow. I took so many notes during that response. I mean, the biggest takeaway is power in the pause. Whew, like, full on, yes, that resonated so deeply with me. I cannot tell you how many times I want to be really quick just to say something or respond or, clap back or fire back quickly. But the times where I restrain, I think I approach things with, not that I don't think, but, approach things with curiosity versus blame, right? And you just kind of step back and take a pause and you listen, that is so crucial because it's just the outcomes are just better. They just are, right? If you give yourself an hour or 24 hours or a day and you marinate and you think through all the things and like to your point, you're not looking at one side of the coin, it's just a better outcome, right? It's you kind of take the emotion out of it and you're looking at the facts. And I think for every individual, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, that is such a powerful statement. Like power in the pause, take your time. And then like listening with intent. I think a lot of times, Erin, people hear themselves talk and then they're just like waiting for the next time they can interject or say something, right? But actively listening and understanding, what is their intent? What do they need? I want to make sure that I'm like hearing all sides. That's another one that's huge. And do you feel in those situations when you've been able to like actually follow through, right, on all of those like key things that even if a leader doesn't like what you have to say, that there are oftentimes more like amicable or they get it too, like you've kind of diffused the situation. I guess that's the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, absolutely, right? Like, in heated situations, exactly what you said, Sammy, is like, oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this too, is like you are just waiting to interject to get another point across instead of listening to the other side. And oftentimes, like any type of conflict, when you come in with that type of like, I'm ready to go, I'm the one that's right, it gets lost. And, some of the time you don't even know what you're arguing anymore. And so I think that my role here is to really help lay that framework and that foundation so that we're able to have a conversation about it. And, again, like not all sides may see the decision or, but being able to articulate the why thoroughly is the most important part. And it helps, it helps for me and my position to make those, articulated movements and decisions while also notating like the conflict so that it's like, okay, this is happening with these folks, it's happening with other folks. And, when it comes time to review our rules, perhaps there's room for improvement here. Like how can we come up with a new policy to prevent this moving forward? Sometimes you can't, right? Like you don't want to have rules that are so, it's like reading an encyclopedia, not translatable to anyone. You end up with more questions anyway. But at least a very thorough guideline on, the rules and the policies to keep people focused and to eliminate any types of conflicts of this nature like we're talking about. That's our goal here.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know I needed to hear that, and it's such a good reminder. Being really articulate with your reasoning if you don't go a certain way, explaining the why and active listening are such a huge part of that. So we have time for one more question. I can't believe we're already at the end. This has been so fun. Tell yourself, so let me ask, you've been at Meraki for over 8 years now, or coming up on a decade with the company, which is incredible. You've navigated so much change. Looking back, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself on your first day at Meraki?
I think that looking back, I would tell myself to ask my questions. Don't sit with them. Immediately feel your people out. Like find your network that is outside of your team, right? Like build a diverse network and take calculated risks. Like that is one thing that I love at Meraki is like it's a risk-taking culture, and like let's challenge the status quo. Let's think outside the box. Let's be able to say why we think this way and why we want to flip this thing on its head, and then go do it and test it. I think doing that earlier would have helped me in the longer term to be more confident in the skill set that I have to bring to the table. It's again, I was very lucky to have leaders that kind of put me under their wing, like, we see this in you, like, go do this, go ask your questions, that sort of thing. And I needed that push, but I always had it in me, just didn't have the confidence necessarily to be that person.
Yeah. Wow. That is really good advice. And it resonated with me and that hit home to, build your network, ask the questions, do it sooner, have faith in that what you are thinking, probably 10 other people have that same question. So just ask it, right? Um, Great. Well, Erin, thank you so much for joining. What did you think? Your first podcast in the books.
I think it's my first and my last. Thank you for having me, Sammy. This was great.
Your first and your last. I thought you were going to be like, oh, I've totally fallen in love with it. Gonna
Sign
do
me
this
up for
all the
next
time.
week. No, just kidding.
I know. Well, thank you again for joining. I'm so excited to continue to work with you and to partner with you.
Likewise.
You are one of the best that we have. And I'll
Right
say it
back
right
at
here.
ya.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. That wraps up another episode of the Meraki Unboxed podcast. Again, my name is Sammy Brenner. Thank you so much for tuning in, for sticking with us, and be sure to come back here in 2 weeks. We will have a new episode and amazing content ready for you. Take care.